Tourism isn't good or bad, but it's not neutral either. Where is the line between helping a country rebuild and turning somebody else's trauma into our next Instagram pic? Hi, I'm Justine, the nerdy half. I love to travel and I like to keep myself informed. So every week I take a look behind the headlines and share that with you. With today's headlines full of conflict, I'm going to take a look at those countries that used to be in our too dangerous column and are now hidden gems plastered all over the internet. Tourism really can genuinely help a country rebuild, but only if it's done in the right way. In this video, I'm going to look at some real-world examples of post-conflict travel and create a decision framework that will help us decide why and how and when is the best way to travel after conflict. Because most post-conflict tourism asks itself, is it safe to visit? When the real question should be, are they ready to host us? I'm starting with Montenegro because that's an example I can speak to through my own personal experience. During the 90s, most of what is now Montenegro was viewed as unsafe for travel. Fast forward to today and its Adriatic coastline is full of cruise ships, its streets are full of tourists. Lonely Planet and other such forums count it as one of the hidden gems, and it's become one of Europe's fastest growing tourist destinations. Yet still, when I first said I was going to Montenegro, a lot of people said, where is that again? If I was talking to someone my generation or above, I just needed to say, it used to be Yugoslavia, and that rang some bells. News footage and U2 songs came to mind. For my generation, the story kind of froze in the 90s. But if I'm talking to someone younger, I just explain that this area was the backdrop for Game of Thrones. Ah, yeah, that's where that music festival was. I have a friend who loves the beach parties there. Meanwhile, the people living here have had to rebuild their lives in that gap of generations. Living in Montenegro in 23-24, Daryl and I saw that struggle to rebuild on a daily basis. After becoming a state in its own right, Montenegro courted tourism to help rebuild its infrastructure. Numbers grew steadily, and in 2024 they had 2.6 million visitors. Doesn't sound like much compared to some of the big hotspots, but considering their population is in the low 600,000, it's kind of like 4 visitors for every 1 citizen. But the growth hasn't been steady, and that has caused some issues. Everywhere you go in Montenegro, you're going to see abandoned buildings, skeletons of concrete, half built and then just left. Because everything was kind of rushed and not that well planned. A lot of funding fell through after the initial boom. They also struggled with corruption because they were still getting their government into a stable order. Roads popped up really quickly, but this means they weren't very well built because they were built under pressure, trying to connect neighbourhoods that were now strained by heavy summer traffic. The uneven spread of the boom also meant that employment fluctuates greatly seasonally, and coastal areas that responded to the tourism had a lot of increased cost, but they didn't always get the return needed to cover it throughout the year. And some of the biggest problems is in the water shortages and the trash. We lived in Shushan near Bar, and there wasn't yet a very strategic system for collecting trash. It doesn't sound right? I mean, if all this tourist money is coming in, surely the government has enough to build that infrastructure. Well, not all the money that comes in stays there. Tourism does account for about 1/4 of Montenegro's GDP, but there's also a huge amount of tourism money that goes straight back out again. The benefits of the boom are skewed towards foreign investors or the upscale travel market, so locals often miss out on the gains and sometimes even face rising costs. Spots like Porto Montenegro and Lustica Bay are estimated to have about 60% foreign ownership, and it's very much targeted towards the wealthy Russians and Ukrainians. It's those with bigger budgets who are able to continue to travel during times of conflict in their own region. So high-end luxury tourism has kept steady, while mass tourism has reduced significantly. Cruise lines have done very well too. Ports at Kotor and Bar have seen a lot of traffic. But research shows that on those quick stops, the passengers usually only spend around 50 to 70 euros on shore. that's kind of peanuts when you compare it to those that have come to stay overnight, who usually end up spending around about 200 euros a day. So most of the money is sailing back off with the Royal Caribbean. And the environment and the small fisheries suffered too. Cruise ships pollute the bay, and the traffic from all those fancy yachts, that disrupts the fishing grounds. And some of those resort marinas are actually blocking access to traditional fishing grounds, meaning small communities are losing their traditional livelihoods. And because of the increase in flights, energy-hungry hotels, AC systems, swimming pool systems, this has increased the emissions to above the recommended level for tourism. Okay, it's not all doom and gloom. Montenegro has gained enough from its tourism revenue to build main motorways, to increase jobs and increase private consumption. But it's in Africa where we see some of the best examples of recovery through tourism. And this is because African communities have approached it from a forward-thinking, collective decision-making framework. Take Rwanda, for example. In 1990, this was mostly just associated with genocide. But from the early 2000s, Rwanda has pursued a tightly controlled, community-led tourism rebuild. It's working not just because of what it's opened up, but because of what it's deliberately limited. After the conflict, the national parks that bordered the areas of the communities that suffered from the violence, they weren't just automatically opened back up again. Consultation came first. They built revenue sharing systems into law before the visitors' numbers expanded, so that revenue could be given back to the community to build schools, health centres and infrastructure. And they did it slowly. It was only once communities could start to see the benefits for themselves on the ground and were able to represent themselves within the governance of the parks, then tourism numbers were allowed to increase. The sequence really matters. It's not about just bringing in a lot of money fast. It's bringing in money in a steady way that has focused growth on conservation, on community needs, on safety and on local ownership. Mountain gorilla trekking has been the flagship, but not because it draws in the crowd, but because it limits them. The permits are capped, the prices are high, and the revenue is shared. Former poachers are now employed as tourist guides. The result isn't mass tourism, it's a slow, steady growth. And Sierra Leone is another example. It's very similar, but on a slightly different scale. After their brutal civil war, their infrastructure was completely damaged. Recovery has come gradually, and this time not through luxury resorts. It's mostly through small coastal getaways, community-run eco-lodges, and local businesses backed by the diaspora. Those that have moved away are supporting those back home. Northern Uganda took a really similar approach. The village councils and the local communities worked with NGOs to create cultural tourism under local ownership. And they didn't see tourism as their get out of jail free card. It was a secondary income after all the land disputes were settled. Once the locals gained control and felt safe, then the tourism was able to help them rebuild. Now, don't get me wrong, Africa's model isn't perfect and it hasn't been universally applied across the continent. In areas where people were still displaced or traumatised, still politically divided, attempts at tourism just stalled or caused more trouble. Readiness shouldn't be measured by marketing potential or international demand. Countries are ready to invite us back in when they're able to collectively set their own boundaries, decide their own benefits and trade-offs. Most post-conflict tourism asks itself, is it safe to visit? When the real question should be, are they ready to host us? So I've made a bit of a 10-question checklist to help us answer that. Number one, what's the reality on the ground? A destination may technically be open, but is it really ready socially and through its infrastructure? The best people to answer that are the people on the ground. So you want to look at the local news. Google the country's name and local news in English or in whatever language you prefer. You want to look for signs that the community is functioning healthily, that schools are operating, marketplaces are open. Check the traffic reports. Are people able to go about their daily lives comfortably? Local community Facebook or Telegram groups, those are going to give you a lot of insight too. Number 2, how much say have the locals had? Have these tourism decisions been made by just one small group, or is everyone involved? You want to look for examples of cooperative management. Do tourism operators have advisory boards? What's the process they have to go to establish their sites? Number 3, how stable is the peace? Even when countries are technically open, sometimes there are still little flare-ups or pockets of political instability. Again, the local news will keep you updated on this. You probably also want to check out the UN or World Bank reports. They'll often give you a heads up on those sorts of political instabilities. International travel advisories are a kind of reasonable guide, but you can't always just take them at face value either. Last week's video went into a little bit more depth around that, so I'll pop the link in below. Number 4, will my spending benefit the community? Prioritize locally owned businesses, restaurants, hotels, etc. On the big tours, you want to look at how their revenue is shared. If it doesn't tell you, then you might want to ask the question. Number 5, are operators environmentally responsible? If these communities have just been through conflict, then their ecosystems are already fragile. So look on the websites for eco certifications. Sites like WWF, Fauna and Flora International, Wildlife Conservation Society. Number 6, are your guides local? This is important not just because you'll be getting local insight, but also because they're more likely to be sensitive to the trauma that's still happening in the community. You don't want tours that are going to glamorize the conflict, and neither do you want those that are going to brush over it. You want local guides who can provide the historical context and the lived experience. Use terms like locals or community-led when you're searching for operators. Number 7, am I timing my visit responsibly? And this is where off-season travel is a huge benefit, not just for you, but for the community. If you search best time to visit, you're likely to get when it's best for you seasonally, for the weather, etc., etc., not when it's best for them. Think about their busy periods apart from tourism. You don't want to be interrupting harvest time or taking away local labour that could be used in rebuilding efforts. Number 8, can I support recovery long term? If you've really only got a one-off visit, make sure while you're there that you're promoting local programs for others. Don't just take snapshots of yourself on the beach. Also promote the workshops that you went to, the local guide, give them a good review, and ask the locals you interact with, what would you like me to share with the rest of the world? Don't just see this as a one-off break for you, but as a long-term solution for them. Number 9, is the airspace and the borders stable? How might any disruption impact locals, not just you? A sudden closure on a border or in an airspace isn't just going to interrupt your travel plans. It might stop emergency services getting through, delivery of aid, and put a burden on all those local support systems. And you don't want to get in their way. So think it through in advance and have a backup plan. Make sure your insurance, that's number 10, is your insurance going to help you get out of the way? Because the last thing you want to do is have the locals have to look after you while they're trying to help themselves. You don't want to be diverting limited resources away from the folks who need it most. And again, last week's video went through some of the things you need to look for in your insurance policies. So how soon is too soon? You might think Ukraine is out of the question, right? But actually there are tour operators still going there. Ukraine War Tours, for example, run small community-led groups that are educational. They provide local guides, there's secure transport, and the money is funneled back to the locals. It's not mass tourism, but there are travel products still being sold while the conflict is happening. If you're thinking about any of those, please use those questions to double check, is this the right time? Tourism isn't good or bad, but it's not neutral either. Our money and our physical presence somewhere is a vote, whether we're ready to admit that or not. So to make sure that your values are reflected in your practice, you need to keep yourself informed. So please stick with me, because that's what I'm planning to do. I'm going to keep doing more nerdy deep dives to turn the headlines into practical travel decisions. So please share this with that friend that keeps sending you those Instagram links. What if we went here? What if we did? And don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell, because who knows what's going to happen next week. Until then, happy travels everyone.